She left me for a rich guy but begged for help later. I saved her, but only on my terms. I loved her with everything I had. Sarah wasn't just my girlfriend. She was my rock, my muse, my everything. We met in college, and from the very first moment, it felt like we were meant to be. She'd challenge me to dream bigger, and I was her steady support, always by her side. Back then, I thought we were building a life together, one where we'd achieve our dreams hand in hand. But all of that came crashing down the moment he entered her life. Jason, the wealthy entrepreneur, swept into our social circle with his expensive suits, flashy cars, and endless confidence. At first, I didn't think much of it. Sarah seemed happy with me, and we had a solid relationship, or so I thought. It started subtly. She began mentioning him in passing, things like, "Jason's invited us to this amazing rooftop bar," or, "He just got back from a private island vacation." Slowly, those mentions became more frequent, and then the invitations stopped, including me. I noticed she'd get excited every time he texted her, her eyes lighting up in a way I hadn't seen in months. And then, one night, it happened. She sat me down, her face unreadable, and said, "I think we want different things. And Jason, well, he can give me the life I've always dreamed of." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I tried to fight for us, to remind her of everything we'd been through, but her mind was made up. "You're a good guy, but I can't ignore what I want anymore," she said as she walked out of my apartment and out of my life. The months that followed were the darkest of my life. I buried myself in work, desperately trying to distract myself from the heartbreak. At first, I thought I'd never recover, but slowly, something shifted. I channeled all my pain into my career, working long hours and taking risks I never would have taken before. By the end of that year, I had landed a major promotion and started my own small business. It wasn't easy, but I clawed my way up, step by step, until I finally felt like I had rebuilt myself. 2 years later, just as I was starting to feel truly happy again, I got a message out of the blue. "Hey, can we talk?" It was Sarah. My heart raced as I stared at the screen. Part of me wanted to ignore her, but curiosity got the better of me. I agreed to meet her for coffee. When she walked in, I barely recognized her. Gone was the confident, vibrant woman I'd once loved. She looked tired, worn down, and uncertain. She sat across from me, avoiding eye contact, and finally said, "I know I have no right to ask, but I need your help." It turned out Jason wasn't the perfect man she thought he was. He'd strung her along, showering her with gifts and promises, only to leave her in debt and completely alone. She'd tried to rebuild her life, but things had spiraled out of control, and now she had nowhere else to turn. Hearing her story stirred something in me, but it wasn't the old love I'd once felt. It was pity, and a bit of vindication. Still, I wasn't about to let her off easy. "I'll help you," I said, "but on my terms." She blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "I can give you a job," I explained. "You'll start at the bottom, entry-level assistant work. Long hours, low pay. You'll have to prove you're serious about turning your life around." Her face fell, and for a moment I thought she'd refuse, but then she nodded. "I don't have any other choice," she whispered. Over the next few months, Sarah worked for me, and I saw a side of her I'd never seen before. The arrogance and entitlement were gone, replaced by humility and determination. She showed up early, stayed late, and took every task seriously. Watching her change was strangely cathartic. One evening, after everyone else had left the office, she approached me. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said. "Not just for the job, but for giving me a chance to fix my mistakes." I nodded, unsure of what to say. There was no longer any bitterness in me, just a quiet sense of closure. Sarah and I had both moved on, but in that moment, I realized something important. I didn't need her apology, nor did I need her validation. I'd grown into someone stronger, someone who knew his worth. By the end of the year, Sarah had saved enough to move on and start over. She left the company, and we parted on good terms. I haven't seen her since, but sometimes I wonder if she ever thinks about what she gave up. As for me, I know one thing for sure. I'm exactly where I'm meant to be, and I don't regret a single moment of the journey that got me here. I helped her through a divorce, but she fell for my best friend Megan, and I had been best friends since our freshman year of college. She was the kind of person who could light up a room without even trying. Smart, funny, with this incredible warmth that made everyone around her feel special. We had been through everything together: late-night study sessions, failed relationships, and dreams about what our lives would look like after graduation. When Megan got married, I was genuinely happy for her. Her husband Ryan seemed like a great guy, kind, ambitious, and madly in love with her. I even gave a toast at their wedding, talking about how lucky he was to have someone like her by his side. Little did I know that just a few years later, I'd be the one helping her pick up the pieces after their marriage fell apart. It started with small cracks. She'd mention things like how Ryan was always working late, or how they hadn't gone on a real date in months. At first, I thought it was just normal relationship stuff. Every marriage has its ups and downs. But then the cracks grew bigger. She'd call me late at night, her voice shaking as she told me about their fights. He was distant, dismissive, and uninterested in anything that mattered to her. Then one night she showed up at my apartment with tears streaming down her face. "It's over," she said, barely able to get the words out. Ryan had told her he didn't want to be married anymore, that he felt trapped and needed to find himself. He packed a bag and left just like that. I let her crash on my couch that night, and for the next few weeks I was her rock. I listened to her cry, helped her sort through the paperwork for the divorce, and even went with her to meetings with her lawyer. She was devastated, and all I wanted was to make her feel like she wasn't alone. As time went on, she started spending more and more time at my place. We fell into a comfortable rhythm, cooking dinner together, watching movies, and even laughing again. It felt good to see her smile after everything she'd been through. Somewhere along the way, I realized my feelings for her had grown deeper than friendship. I'd always cared about Megan, but now I saw her in a completely new light. She was resilient, compassionate, and stronger than I'd ever imagined. I wanted to tell her how I felt, but every time I worked up the courage, I held back. I didn't want to ruin what we had, especially when she was still healing from the divorce. One weekend, I invited Megan to a party with some of my old college friends. I thought it would be good for her to get out of the house and have some fun. That's when she met him, Anthony, my best friend. Anthony was everything I wasn't: outgoing, charming, and effortlessly cool. He and Megan hit it off immediately, laughing and talking like they'd known each other for years. I watched from the sidelines, my stomach twisting in knots. Over the next few weeks, it became clear that they were seeing each other. Megan told me about their dates, how sweet and thoughtful Anthony was, and how he made her feel like she could believe in love again. Every time she talked about him, I felt like I was being punched in the gut. But I didn't say anything. I told myself that if she was happy, that was all that mattered. I tried to be supportive, even though it killed me inside. A few months later, everything fell apart. Megan showed up at my door again, tears in her eyes. "He's not who I thought he was," she said. Anthony, for all his charm, wasn't ready for anything serious. He'd led her on, only to back out when things got too real. This time, when she turned to me for comfort, something inside me shifted. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep being her emotional crutch while burying my own feelings. "Megan, I can't keep doing this," I said, my voice trembling. "I care about you more than anything, but I can't keep pretending I'm okay with being just your friend. Watching you fall for someone else, especially someone like Anthony, it's been torture. I need some space to figure out how to move on." She looked stunned, like she hadn't even considered that I might feel this way. I didn't know," she said softly. "I never wanted to hurt you, I know, I replied, but I need to take care of myself now. That was the last real conversation we had. Megan eventually moved to a different city to start fresh, and I focused on rebuilding my life without her in it. Looking back, I don't regret helping her through the divorce. She needed me, and I'm glad I could be there for her when no one else was. But I learned an important lesson. Sometimes, loving someone means letting them go, for their sake and your own. I paid for her surgery, but she left me for another man. Then he betrayed her, and she came back. Emma and I had been together for 3 years when everything changed. She was the love of my life, or at least I thought so at the time. Emma was vibrant, full of energy, and always chasing her dreams. She had this way of making you feel like the most important person in the world, and I was captivated by her. But beneath all that confidence, she had a vulnerability, a medical condition she'd been struggling with for years. It wasn't life-threatening, but it caused her pain and limited her ability to pursue the active lifestyle she loved. Surgery could fix it, but the cost was astronomical. She didn't have the money, and her insurance didn't cover it. Without hesitation, I stepped up. I drained my savings, postponed plans to buy a house, and took out a small loan to cover the surgery. "You don't have to do this," she told me, her voice trembling. But I knew I did. I couldn't stand to see her suffer, and I loved her more than anything. The surgery went well, and for a while it felt like we were stronger than ever. Emma was happier, healthier, and filled with gratitude. She would look at me with tears in her eyes and say, "I don't know how to thank you." I told her she didn't need to. Seeing her happy was all I wanted. But then things started to change. A few months after her recovery, Emma began spending more time out of the house. She started going to events and fitness classes, reconnecting with old friends, and posting pictures of herself living her best life on social media. I was proud of her, but something felt off. One day she came home and said she needed to talk. Her words hit me like a freight train. "I think we've grown apart. I'm grateful for everything you've done for me, but I feel like I need to explore who I am now." She couldn't even look me in the eye. I later found out she'd been seeing someone else, a guy she'd met at one of her fitness classes. He was flashy, confident, and everything I wasn't. It felt like a knife in my heart. I couldn't believe that after everything I'd sacrificed for her, she could walk away so easily. The months that followed were some of the hardest of my life. I felt used, discarded, like all I'd done for her meant nothing. But I threw myself into my work, determined not to let her betrayal define me. 6 months later, I got a message from her. "Hey, can we talk?" I stared at the screen, torn between ignoring her and satisfying my curiosity. Eventually, I agreed to meet her. She looked different when she walked into the coffee shop, tired, unsure, and not the confident woman I remembered. She sat down, avoiding eye contact, and finally said, "I made a mistake." As it turned out, the guy she'd left me for wasn't the dream partner she thought he was. He'd promised her the world, but in reality, he was controlling and manipulative. He isolated her from her friends, ran up her credit cards, and left her with a pile of debt when he disappeared. Now she was alone, broke, and desperate. I listened to her story, and part of me felt vindicated. But another part of me felt something I hadn't expected: pity. As much as she had hurt me, seeing her like this was painful. "I don't know why I'm here," she said, her voice trembling. I didn't know who else to turn to." For a long moment, I didn't say anything. Then I looked her in the eye and said, "I'll help you, but on my terms." Her eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "I'll give you a loan to get back on your feet," I explained. "But that's all it will be. A loan. No handouts, no getting back together. You'll pay me back every cent." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. Over the next year, she worked tirelessly to rebuild her life. She took on multiple jobs, cut out the toxic people from her life, and slowly started paying me back. Each payment felt like closure, a reminder that I was no longer the guy who let people take advantage of him. One day, after she'd made her final payment, she asked if we could talk. "I don't know how to say this," she began, "but I'm so sorry for everything. You didn't deserve what I did to you." I looked at her and realized I didn't feel anger anymore. I'd moved on. "I appreciate that," I said, "but I think we're better off going our separate ways." She nodded, a sad smile on her face. "You're probably right." That was the last time I saw Emma. I heard through mutual friends that she's doing well now, and I'm genuinely happy for her. As for me, I've learned to value myself and set boundaries. I'll never let anyone take advantage of me like that again. Looking back, I don't regret helping her with the surgery. It taught me a lot about love, sacrifice, and self-respect. And while our story didn't have a happy ending, it gave me the strength to write a better one for myself.